This video has been made possible with help from people like Kyle and Alandria, so a very big shout out to them. And if you also want to support the channel, please check the link to my Patreon page in the video description. Safe. I say this with no exaggeration. Final Fantasy VII is one of the most important video games I have ever experienced, but I'll save you the explanations on why that is for another video maybe. For now, the main tidbit of context you need to know when coming into this video is that Final Fantasy VII is so unbelievably crucial to me, and I have waited a very long time to talk about some of its characters. That time is now, and so precious is our time that I don't even want to waste any of it with me chatting breeze during an intro segment. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's get going. We'll start with a lore and backstory check before getting into the details regarding Aerith herself, and considering the character we're going to be talking about here, my usual catchy slogan probably matters more than ever. You should probably expect spoilers. Final Fantasy VII takes place on the fictional planet of Gaia. Within its core layers, Gaia contains something called the life stream, a source of spiritual energy that powers the planet, keeping its natural elements alive and thriving. A little side note to mention here is how this energy can also sometimes crystallize or condense into spherical objects called materia. These orbs contain different magical properties depending on the color type, with some specific materia being incredibly rare. I mentioned this side note now as it will come up again later on. The lifestream can also be manually extracted from the planet and converted into something called Mako, a non-renewable form of energy that can power electrical appliances and machinery. While incredibly useful in the day-to-day lives of the common human, some people recognize the long-term ramifications of continuously taking energy from the lifestream, because once it's gone, and the planet will eventually die from being drained of all its life force. The Shinra Company, one of the main antagonistic forces in Final Fantasy VII, have capitalized on the extracting and usage of lifestream energy, opening up Mako reactors all over the world and becoming Gaia's #1 energy provider. Opposing Shinra are a rebel group known as Avalanche, who have taken it upon themselves to blow up the Mako reactors in an effort to save the planet. This group consists of a few key individuals, one of which being a hired mercenary named Cloud Strife, who has only joined their cause because he's after a paycheck. After some missions, Cloud found himself bumping into Aerith Gainsborough, a girl living in the Midgar slums. Bright and cheerful in her approach, Aerith easily broke through Cloud's tough guy persona. There was clearly something special about this girl. So special in fact that the Shinra Company themselves were after Aerith, as they believed she knew the whereabouts of an infinite source of lifestream energy. During one of Cloud's meetings with Aerith, Shinra arrived to capture her. Seeking assistance, Aerith hires Cloud to be her bodyguard and protect her from these pursuers. The union between these two characters would eventually bring her back to the Avalanche group, and Aerith would journey with them from there on. During the story, a greater antagonistic force develops in the form of the character Sephiroth. Naturally, to talk about Sephiroth at length would honestly require its own video, so I'm going to be brief here for the sake of keeping our focus on Aerith. Sephiroth was a once decorated war hero to the Shinra Company. However, after finding out some disturbing information regarding his past, he went insane and turned on not just the Shinra Company, but also all of humanity itself. Believing himself to be the descendant of an ancient race of beings known as the Cetra, Sephiroth seeks to become a god, all the while attempting to destroy the humans who he thinks betrayed him. This Armageddon comes in the form of Sephiroth using the Black Materia. A unique and destructive materia, the Black Materia summons Meteor, which will crash into the planet and wipe out all life. Again, I'm being very brief with this explanation and not doing his story any justice at all, but the reason I have to mention this is how it ties us back around to Aerith. Sephiroth incorrectly believed himself to be part of an ancient race known as the Cetra. In truth, Aerith herself was of Cetra blood. Not only that, but Aerith also carried with her another rare and unique piece of materia known as Holy, the White Materia. A countermeasure to Meteor and the planet's only hope at defending itself from the approaching doomsday, Aerith realizes how important her role is to the unfolding events and takes it upon herself to stop Sephiroth at any personal cost. That's about as deep as I'm going to get for the backstory now, but we'll be touching upon some heavier elements to Aerith's story later on in this video, so as always, that spoiler warning is still in effect. But anyways, let's talk about her appearance for a bit first before we get into all that noise.
Visual design.
Aerith's appearance comes together in the most contrasting of ways. When you take into consideration what she's wearing and how those items pair up together, then further factor in her personality too, which we'll also speak about a little later on, you start to see some really solid character design work here. Firstly, on initial glances, we're led to think Aerith fits the polite, quiet girl trope. A long buttoned sleeveless bodycon dress, pastel pink in colour, evokes a calm and graceful quality that one would expect of a character in this role. She appears pure and soft. However, this dress is accompanied by a red high-cut short-sleeved jacket. The use of dark red shows a different quality, mostly that of strength and alertness. We have our first contrast right here. The innocent qualities of the dress are offset by her loud jacket. The dress is regular and reserved, appearing calm and peaceful. The jacket is somewhat trendy and rebellious in design, showing sharper angles and edges. This tells us instantly that while we're led to believe we're dealing with someone with a kind nature, she's actually no pushover. She has complete confidence in herself. What also helps to bridge the two items are the fact that red and pink are neighbouring colours, so while the types of clothing themselves are from two different worlds, the colours are going hand in hand. Secondly, the contrast is then pushed a little further by her footwear. One would expect that a character of such elegant qualities would have smart and presentable footwear to match the dress, and yet here is Aerith with probably the grimiest boots I've ever seen on a female lead character. I mean, look at them. Yeah, crep check. Your girl is definitely from the ends, bruv. And that's the point I want to make here. That's precisely where Aerith is from. The slums. She lives in the trashy, polluted arsehole of Midgar. Having suitable footwear for such conditions is the sensible choice. There's absolutely nothing trendy or appealing about these boots at all, and that's exactly the focus for their design. This second contrast comes from the fact that while her other items of clothing are telling you about her nature and personality, her footwear isn't. It's telling you about the life she's living, the life of a poor slum girl who is trying to get by and survive. What absolutely compelling character design, in that with just 3 different items of clothing, we've already established so much about her. And it doesn't even stop there, because while we're on the subject of the boots, I'd like to point out another interesting thing that they do for the overall image. When you take into consideration that Aerith's hair colour is of a similar shade, using dark brown for the top and bottom sections allows all the vibrant colours to be framed in the middle of her design. As a result, Aerith's appearance pops out more thanks to this use of colour placements. She's definitely one of the more brightly coloured characters in the game too, and rightfully so, as it matches her bright and beautiful personality, which as I said we'll get onto in a short while. Before we do though, I'd like to spend a brief moment highlighting some thoughts on Aerith's design for the remake. While some of the changes to her design are pretty noticeable, it's impressive how they still keep the same atmosphere about the character intact, if not expand upon them further. For instance, although the design of the boots have changed to feature a bit more detail, they're still presented as somewhat grotty and of poor quality. The jacket itself has changed and has been extended, so now it reaches her waistline instead of her mid-torso, yet it still works in tandem with her dress as it represents her different characteristics. And speaking of the dress, this might be the most distinct change to her whole design. While her previous dress was tightly fitted and clutched to her body shape, the remake depicts Aerith in a more loose-fitting, frilly dress. And what I'm trying to say here is we've lost her hips, fam. Yeah, those were some curves, you know. Those are some curves and I didn't want to see them go, but goddamn. What are we really talking about right now, yeah? Tifa's tits or Aerith's hips, you know what I'm saying? I'm kidding, of course. What I genuinely find interesting about this change is how it actually helps to imbue the soft, approachable aspects of her personality even more. The loosely fitted dress feels much more relaxed than her previous one, offering a lighter, more carefree vibe to the character. Not only that, but it's less restrictive of her movement, and if you've seen Aerith move around in the remake, you'll know that they've given her this whole elegant dancing angle when she's in battle, so while Aerith is casting spells, she's twirling and dancing as she goes, with the dress trailing around her as she does so, and it looks really gorgeous. While I like the more fitted design of her previous dress, I absolutely appreciate how this new one does way more for the overall appearance and works even better at creating that awesome level of contrast across her design. She looks fantastic either way, and whichever version you gravitate towards the most, the same elements of her personality are magnified thanks to this design. Speaking of which, let's talk about her personality right now.
Personality.
As I was saying in the last section, thanks to the majority of her visual design, we're led to believe that this woman is the polite type. And that is somewhat true, yeah. Aerith is very easy to get along with. She's friendly and is also extremely pleasant to be around, offering a warm and captivating demeanor that feels welcoming to others. But taking everything else we highlighted about her visual design into consideration, we're also granted some other character traits that build a much more vivid picture of Aerith's personality. For example, a typical trope for the polite girl type is that these characters are not too loud, often appearing shy and timid. Well, not Aerith Gainsborough, no, this girl will grab you by the crotch and take you for a ride. Either that or she'll straight up rip it off, bruv. I'm serious. Aerith is so incredibly outgoing. She's full of life and love. She speaks from the heart, and when she does, she speaks loudly. She's wonderfully daring and playful, coming across as one of the most adventurous characters in the whole game. When the part of the story occurs requiring Cloud to dress like a woman to infiltrate a club, Aerith was the wild little madam to suggest it. That was her idea, and she loved every second of getting Cloud kitted up for this crazy plan of hers. To her, it was fun. Aerith has so much confidence in herself, she never shies away from sharing her feelings. As we spoke about earlier, the part of her visual design that references this confidence is that red jacket. It's strong and bold in colour and shape, being the loudest item of clothing she wears. This type of jacket is commonly worn by the cool and courageous, and you get precisely that type of character when Aerith's personality comes into play. Lastly, we're reminded of Aerith's upbringing in the slums because she is very streetwise. She ain't a punk. She's harder around the edges than your run-of-the-mill soft girl next door type. Especially when she's had Shinra pursue her for a long time and living in such terrible surroundings, it's going to mold her personality into that of a survivor. And even then, if things are not in her favour and she has to absolutely take a loss, she will take it but not without still being heard. She will still hold her ground on her opinions, she will still say what she has to say, and to her very last breath she will stand for what she believes in. Your typical well-spoken polite girl she isn't. Her environment, her backstory, and her experiences have all shaped her into something much more. Importance. To the story that unfolds in Final Fantasy VII, Aerith is one of the most central figures for two reasons. Firstly, being the holder of the white materia, a materia that she said was good for nothing because it didn't seem to do anything, turns out to be the most important item in the game once she realizes what it does. The white materia magic is crucial for saving the world from its demise, and Aerith being the person responsible for activating it means her importance to the outcome is critical. Secondly, although I haven't really touched upon this that much, she is part of the ancient race known as the Cetra. Why is this important exactly? Well, coupled together with her being the holder of the white materia, Aerith is actually the last of her kind. She's the sole remaining Cetra in existence. That's a pretty heavy burden to bear already, and one that carries with it a lot of responsibility, as mentioned by her ownership of the white materia, which is in fact an item passed down through the Cetra bloodline. Being the last remaining Cetra alive puts Aerith in a very unique spotlight, one in which she absolutely has to succeed in. All eyes are on her. And what can you do with a character when all eyes are on them? Well... yeah, look, alright, look. I know this game is a million years old and everybody should have played it by now, but just in case you haven't, and just in case you've somehow managed to avoid spoilers for Final Fantasy VII this long, firstly, congratulations, because that's a bloody impressive achievement already, and secondly, we're hitting the major spoiler right now, alright? You have been warned. Here we go. Taking everything into consideration, taking into account Aerith's role in the story and the importance she has to the events unfolding, Aerith ultimately dies in her attempt to stop Sephiroth. This can be considered a likely conclusion for someone in such a role, a martyr for the greater good, a sacrifice to save the world, and you'd be right for saying this is nothing groundbreaking by today's standards, but I feel that's missing the point. It shouldn't be whether or not this is a common theme used in storytelling, it should be about if this theme left a lasting impression on us in general. And in Aerith's case, her death can be considered one of the most memorable character deaths in video game history, for numerous reasons, depending on who you ask. For me personally, I find there was a lot of impact in the way this moment was presented. There was no blaze of glory. There is nothing hectic or frantic about how it happens. Aerith is in prayer as she calmly activates her white materia to summon Holy and defend the planet. A single strike of Sephiroth's sword is what sadly and rather abruptly ends her life instantly. There's no dying wish or any last words to remember her by, nothing. Just a prayer, the strike, and silence. The whole scene plays out slowly, quietly. It takes its time. They want you to remember this moment carefully. They want this to sink in. Aerith, the character tasked with the most pressing of priorities, the character who is the last of her race, has died. Unthinkable, irreplaceable, but true. This wasn't towards the end of the game. This wasn't a narrative conclusion like how most protagonist deaths tend to occur when the story is wrapping up. Aerith dies a third of the way into the story, leaving you, the player, to travel the rest of the game without her. The story has to keep going. You have to keep going. That's just a short explanation of how Aerith's death left an impact on me, but there's so many more layers to it that I couldn't possibly cover it all in this video. If you have a free spare hour, I highly recommend checking out Super Eyepatchwolf's video on Final Fantasy VII. It is very spoiler heavy because it covers a broad range of topics as to why this game was so well remembered by a lot of people, but the main reason I'm bringing it up here is because he has a section regarding Aerith's role in the game and why and how her death left an impact on a lot of us. If you don't mind insane spoilers, then please go and watch it. It's honestly an amazing video and I practically agree with everything he covers on there.
Conclusion.
Aerith clearly had tremendous amounts of thought put into her. From a visual design that complements aspects about the character's personality and lifestyle, to the narrative direction chosen for her personal conclusion. Everything about Aerith was made to be memorable, so she would remain in our minds for years to come, and I think it's fair to say she did. So effectively was she presented to us that fans spent years after the game was over seeing if there was any way you could legitimately revive her. They asked Square to bring her back. Gamers made fan mods which put Aerith back into the game themselves. How important must the character be to receive that sort of reaction from the community? Aerith clearly had a strong lasting impact on many of us. I think that says something towards how successful Square was in creating her. If the fans just accepted her death and then moved on, it would have been nothing more than another plot point in that game you played that one time. But instead, they latched on. Other Final Fantasies came and went, and still, years and years later, Aerith was still being spoken about. The people cared. They still care today. And if Aerith doesn't contain the markings of a truly solid character with incredible longevity, then I honestly don't know who else does. Yo, thanks for checking out this episode of Who Dat. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please leave your own thoughts of Aerith in the comments. I'm curious to see what you all think of her. And if you're new around these ends, please consider subscribing too. That would be nice. Sending a very big shout out to these wonderful people for backing me on Patreon. Much love to all of you for being here. Thank you so much. And if you want to join them, please consider checking out my Patreon page. Links are in the video description and all support is greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you need to catch me outside of the YouTubes, I'm over on Twitter and Instagram as well, so head that way if you're into them things. I've been DiGi Valentine, thanks for your time, take care, and I'll see you all again real soon.